Each Friday, the elderly woman quietly set a box of cookies on the steps of the post office. No one inquired about the reason. No one expressed their gratitude to her. The clerk hardly offered any acknowledgement these days. For 8 years, she persevered unwaveringly, enduring rain, snow, and personal struggles. On a crisp autumn morning, the earth shook beneath us. A Black Hawk helicopter glided down into her backyard. A soldier emerged, clutching a worn silver card, tears flowing down his rugged face. Who would arrange for an elite military unit to land solely to express gratitude? Greetings and welcome to Great Man. Let's reveal the truth behind what occurred. Margaret Campbell's hands had lost some of their former steadiness. At 71, she could still roll cookie dough with the same precision that had earned her fame in Oak Ridge, Iowa. The cozy kitchen was alive with the sweet scents of vanilla and cinnamon, while the morning sun streamed through the well-worn gingham curtains she had crafted long ago. Margaret had been widowed for 15 years since cancer took her husband Richard. She resided alone in the modest 2-bedroom house where they had raised their only son, Andrew. The wall continued to display his photographs, showcasing everything from his gap-toothed elementary school portraits to his proud pose in marine dress blues. Andrew had pursued his father's military legacy, serving honorably until 2007, when an IED in Afghanistan claimed his life at the age of 23. Following 4 decades of teaching 2nd grade at Oak Ridge Elementary, Margaret embraced a serene retirement. Her pension met her modest needs, enabling her to make regular donations to the local church and volunteer at Sunny Pines Retirement Home each Wednesday. However, it was her baking that genuinely characterized her within the community. Her pies had claimed the county fair blue ribbon for 11 consecutive years, and her Christmas cookies were nothing short of legendary. On a brisk evening in 2015, Margaret sat by herself, engrossed in the nightly news. A report depicted soldiers stationed in Syria, youthful individuals clad in dusty uniforms, narrowing their eyes against the blazing desert sun. A soldier, just a bit older than Andrew was, smiled bashfully at the camera and talked about missing his mom's chocolate chip cookies. Margaret sat in silence, tears streaming down her face, her tea forgotten and cooling next to her. The young man's expression, a blend of courage and longing for home, reflected Andrew's during his final video call home. The following morning, she awoke with determination. By noon, she had baked 24 chocolate chip cookies and a dozen snickerdoodles, meticulously packaging them in a tin lined with wax paper. She wrote a heartfelt note for someone far away, wishing them safety. Margaret C. inquired at the post office about the location of the closest military base. The clerk appeared taken aback, yet offered the details for Fort Dixon, located 40 miles away. Margaret promptly covered the shipping costs. That month, her teacher's pension was a bit tighter. There was no response, no note of gratitude, yet the next Friday, Margaret showed up again with another tin of cookies and a handwritten note. Week after week, she persisted in her ritual. 1 tin turned into 2, then 3, as she envisioned various soldiers receiving them. She never referred to her son explicitly, yet on every box, she inscribed, "For those serving silently." A mother who once waited for her son, her dedication was not understood by everyone. Barbara Linden, her neighbor for 2 decades, sighed one afternoon while Margaret packed cookies into her aging Buick. "Do you honestly believe they consume all those cookies you send?" Barbara inquired, her arms folded over the garden fence. "Margaret, you're simply throwing away flour and sugar." At the post office, Samantha Henderson, a former student of Margaret, now handled her packages with a sympathetic smile. "No one has expressed their gratitude to you yet, have they, Mrs. Campbell? Nowadays, individuals seem to lack the appreciation for things that was once common." Margaret smiled effortlessly. "That's not my reason for doing it, Samantha." As the months turned into years, Margaret's Friday routine settled into a rhythm as dependable as the ringing of church bells. She consistently showed up every week, even during the blizzard of 2017, when she had to dig her car out from 3 feet of snow, during her struggle with pneumonia in 2019, when she baked while sitting on a kitchen stool, and even in 2020, when the world came to a halt and the post office reduced its hours. For 8 years, there have been 416 Fridays, each marked by 416 unreturned gestures of love directed at strangers clad in the same uniform that her son wore when he lost his life. The kind ones often pay the highest price, Margaret said to her cat Sergeant, as she tied another ribbon around a cookie tin. Yet, at times, it's the sole path they are familiar with navigating. Join us to find out what unfolds next for Margaret. During her 8th year of baking cookies, Margaret experienced a severe flare-up of her arthritis one Thursday night. Her fingers, swollen and aching, made it challenging to write her usual note. The pen glided, creating an ink smudge on the card. Exhausted from the thought of beginning anew, she included a postscript. My son cherished these before he fell in Afghanistan. That specific box journeyed further than the majority. After a sequence of military mail transfers, it arrived at Forward Operating Base Horizon in northern Iraq, where Captain Neil Matthews was on his 3rd deployment. The captain was experiencing one of the most challenging days of his military career. A mission had veered off course, not disastrously, but sufficiently to make him ponder his leadership abilities. As the mail came in, he nearly overlooked the worn cookie tin that was jumbled together with the official letters. Something about the handwriting, reminiscent of his grandmother's, compelled him to open it first. The cookies within were a bit crumbled from their extensive journey, yet still enjoyable. The smudged note brought him to a halt. My son cherished these before he fell in Afghanistan. Matthews placed the tin on the surface, his hands trembling unexpectedly. 8 years prior, as a newly commissioned lieutenant, he had been deployed to Afghanistan with the 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines, the very unit noted in the return address label on the box. With steady hands, he scrolled through his phone until he located an old unit photo. In the back row, 3rd from the left, stood Lance Corporal Andrew Campbell. The memory surged through him. The patrol, the explosion, the hurried medevac that arrived too late. That day, Andrew successfully saved 2 fellow Marines by being the first to spot the IED and alerting them with a shout. His final words, filled with anguish as they awaited the helicopter, were about his mother's cookies and the promise he made to bring some for the entire unit when he returned home. Captain Matthews found himself in solitude within his quarters that night. The tin opened next to him, pondering how many of Margaret Campbell's cookies he had unwittingly consumed throughout the years. Curious if she was aware that her son had passed away as a hero. Curious if anyone had informed her that his sacrifice had spared other mothers from hearing the same heartbreaking news she had. In Oak Ridge, Margaret's subtle commitment was starting to attract unwanted scrutiny. A local blog post titled, "Iowa Woman Self-Appoints as Soldier's Mom," implied that she was pursuing attention. The author, who failed to interview Margaret, depicted her actions as emotionally charged performative patriotism aimed at attracting media attention. The message spread within specific circles in the community. Margaret initially observed the shift when Hammer's Hardware, the place where she had purchased baking supplies for years, unexpectedly stated that they were out of the vanilla extract she had asked for. Perhaps you could consider ordering online, suggested the owner's son with a casual shrug. We prefer to stay out of any political matters. Is it political? Margaret had reiterated, truly perplexed. It's simply vanilla, Ethan. Even at church, where Margaret had dedicated 30 years to teaching Sunday school, individuals started to maintain a courteous distance. Her cookie ministry was no longer brought up during prayer requests. The quiet was gentle, yet undeniable. Margaret's grandniece, Chloe, who was visiting from college, noticed the change right away. Aren't people still backing your cookie project, Aunt Margaret? She inquired during Sunday dinner. Margaret sliced her roast beef with precision before responding. Individuals are facing their own worries these days. Doesn't it frustrate you? After all these years, Margaret's smile carried a deeper sense of sorrow than resentment. I'm not upset, my dear. As long as someone keeps Andrew in their thoughts, that's sufficient for me. Margaret found an unmarked envelope in her mailbox. Within was a short handwritten note. Mrs. Campbell, I had the honor of serving with your son in Afghanistan. Your cookie truly made a difference for me last week when I was facing the most difficult decision a soldier can encounter. The realization that someone cares enough to bake for those they don't know inspired me to reach out for help. Kindly continue with your current task. Inside the letter, Margaret found something she recognized right away, a weathered Marine Corps emblem that had once been part of Andrew's uniform. She believed it was gone along with his personal belongings. Margaret pressed the emblem to her heart and wept, keeping the letter a secret from everyone. She effortlessly placed the emblem into Andrew's memory box and went back to baking. With the arrival of winter, the local blog post made a comeback, now featuring a video that had been discreetly captured at the post office. Margaret was seen meticulously organizing her packages when a male voice off camera shouted, "Hey old lady, when are you going to understand that nobody cares about your cookies anymore?" Margaret's face in the video stayed calm, even as her hands shook noticeably while she finished her task. The video gained local attention, attracting harsh comments and ridicule from those who were unaware of Andrew, unaware of Margaret's silent sorrow, and unaware of the letter hidden in her Bible that demonstrated how her steadfastness had saved at least one soldier. Every Friday, regardless of the circumstances, Margaret Campbell upheld her ritual, mixing, baking, packaging, and delivering. The calendar flipped, the seasons shifted, yet her determination stayed steadfast. Her doctor had warned her against pushing herself too hard. "Mrs. Campbell, considering your age and arthritis, this weekly baking marathon is really impacting your health." Margaret had just smiled. "Some pains are worth enduring, doctor." Every batch of cookies held an unseen essence. Reminiscing about Andrew's childhood, when they would bake together on those cozy, rainy afternoons. During his teenage years, he would stealthily take cookie dough from the bowl. His final time off before deployment, when he assisted her in perfecting a new recipe for snickerdoodles. Every meticulously tied ribbon held a mother's everlasting love, one that would not accept death as its final chapter. "As long as soldiers are far from home," she said to Sergeant the Cat while tying another ribbon, "there should be someone who remembers their importance." If you continue to have faith in the impact of small gestures of kindness, please type HOPE in the comments. Share an experience where a simple act had a significant impact on your life or the life of another person. On a notably chilly Friday in November, Margaret awoke to her joints protesting loudly. The arthritis that had accompanied her for years had intensified, and the weather forecast indicated snow by the afternoon. Nevertheless, she gracefully got out of bed at her usual 5 a.m., resolute in her commitment to her routine. By mid-morning, she had completed her baking, yet she encountered difficulty in transporting the cookie tins to her car. The initial box fell from her hands, shattering on the kitchen floor. Cookies strewn across the linoleum as if they were fallen soldiers. Margaret settled into a kitchen chair, feeling a brief sense of defeat. After 8 years, she found herself contemplating the idea of missing a week. During her college break, Chloe was staying with her great-aunt when she discovered Margaret sitting among the scattered cookies, quietly crying. "Aunt Margaret, perhaps it's time to take a break," she proposed softly, kneeling next to her. "You have done plenty." "No one would blame you," Margaret said, wiping her eyes with a hand dusted in flower petals. "Once a week," she continued, her voice more robust than her frail appearance suggested. "It gives me a reason to get up early." Those heartfelt words shattered Chloe's spirit. She assisted Margaret in tidying up the mess and insisted on taking her to the post office. Across the town, sentiments regarding Margaret had become more rigid. Some perceived her as a determined elderly woman holding on to an unwholesome fixation. Some perceived her as craving the spotlight. Few grasped the intensity of her dedication or the personal sorrow that drove it. On the next Thursday, Margaret made her cookies as she typically did, but she required Chloe's assistance to package them. That night, she struggled to sleep, her dreams haunted by Andrew's laughter and the faint echo of helicopter rotors. Friday morning breaks, crisp and bright. Margaret was enjoying her morning tea when the initial tremors rattled her china cabinet. The sound evolved from a faint hum to a clear, rhythmic pounding that shook her windows. "Aunt Margaret!" Chloe shouted from upstairs. Something's happening outside. Margaret walked to the back porch, just as a massive Black Hawk helicopter landed in her small backyard, its powerful rotors bending her old apple tree and sending fallen leaves swirling into little tornadoes. Neighbors stepped out from their homes, some still in bathrobes, all wearing looks of disbelief. Mrs. Linden stood at the garden fence, her mouth wide open. Down the street, someone was already live-streaming the extraordinary event. As the rotors slowed, 6 uniformed soldiers stepped off in flawless formation. They donned formal dress uniforms, with medals shimmering in the morning sun. The lead officer, a captain named Matthews, held a wooden plaque. Margaret remained motionless on her back steps as Captain Matthews came closer and offered a sharp salute. "Mrs. Margaret Campbell?" he asked, although he was clearly aware of her identity. Margaret nodded, her hand gripping her cardigan tightly to shield herself from the wind created by the helicopter. "I am Captain Neil Matthews, ma'am. I was the last surviving member of your son's squad in Afghanistan." The word struck Margaret with a force that felt almost tangible. After 15 years of silence regarding Andrew's service, 15 years filled with official letters and informal condolences, yet lacking personal connections to his final days, here was someone who had been with her son in those last moments. Captain Matthews pressed on, his voice resonating with the gathering crowd of spectators. "Mrs. Campbell, 8 years ago, you started sending cookies to deployed troops. What you may not have realized is that your cookies reached members of your son's former unit on several occasions." He paused, clearly moved. "Last year, I got a package with a smudged note that mentioned your son. That's when it hit me who you were and what you've been up to all these years." Margaret felt her legs give way. Chloe hurried to assist her as Captain Matthews disclosed the complete truth. "Before your son passed away, he mentioned you. He shared how you baked cookies for his entire Little League team after every game, regardless of the outcome. He promised that when he returned home, he'd bring your cookies for everyone." The captain's voice faltered slightly. "Mrs. Campbell, without even realizing it, you honored your son's last promise." A collective gasp echoed among the neighbors gathered at the edges of Margaret's yard. Even Barbara Linden covered her mouth, tears flowing down her cheeks. "The last package we received arrived precisely on the anniversary of an operation in Kandahar, where 3 of our men were saved thanks to the intelligence your son provided. We were holding a memorial service when your cookies arrived. It felt as if Andrew was there with us." Captain Matthews gestured, and the other soldiers stepped forward, each holding something, a folded flag, a shadow box containing medals, photographs of smiling soldiers with cookie tins. "Mrs. Campbell, for over 8 years, your cookies have made their way to military personnel in 7 countries. They were shared among units who may not have known your name, but they certainly felt your care. They came during the most challenging times, holidays spent far from loved ones, after unsuccessful missions, amidst sandstorms and gunfire." He held out the wooden plaque, beautifully engraved, reading Margaret Campbell, Mother of Honor, for her steadfast support of American troops from 2015 to 2023. "This isn't an official military title, ma'am. It's something greater. It's a title bestowed upon you by more than 3,000 service members who have felt your kindness." From within the helicopter, another soldier appeared, holding a large leather-bound book. As he drew near, Captain Matthews clarified, "This holds messages from all those we could locate who enjoyed your cookies. Some penned pages, while others merely affixed their signatures. Each aimed to convey that someone had taken notice, someone had kept them in mind." The book was filled with countless entries, images of soldiers savoring Margaret's cookies in remote outposts, heartfelt notes of appreciation, and tales of how a humble cookie had provided a fleeting sense of home amidst dire situations. A reporter who had come with the increasing crowd shouted, "Mrs. Campbell, what's it like to receive this kind of recognition?" Margaret, with Chloe's support, pondered the question thoughtfully before responding. "I never sought recognition," she said, her voice gentle yet unmistakable. "I simply acted as any mother would. I fulfilled a promise that my son was unable to keep." Captain Matthews nodded. "That's the reason for our presence, ma'am. Not only to express gratitude, but to share that your son's spirit has remained with us all these years. Through your efforts, his promise was realized. The crowd fell silent, many dabbing at their tears. Among them was the hardware store owner, who had refused her vanilla extract, the church members who had turned away, and somewhere in the back, the blogger whose harsh words had spread throughout the town. As the morning sun rose higher, casting elongated shadows across Margaret's yard, a change stirred in Oak Ridge. There was a quiet realization of how completely they had misinterpreted the elderly woman, who had never sought the spotlight, never asked for recognition, and never wavered in her belief that small acts of kindness hold significance, even when they seem to disappear into nothingness. If you think that justice delayed is still justice, type JUSTICE. In the days after the Black Hawk landing, Margaret Campbell's life transformed in both significant and nuanced ways. News vans lined her street, and national morning shows sought interviews. Margaret gracefully rejected each one with the consistent kindness she had always displayed. "I didn't do it for the cameras," she said to Chloe. "I won't start now." Without any fuss, Margaret carried on with her Friday ritual, but this time she found herself with unexpected support. Premium vanilla from the hardware store that had once turned her away, butter and eggs from Barbara Lyndon's chickens, and specialty chocolate from as far away as Belgium, sent by a soldier's grateful parents, appeared on her porch. The town's industrial kitchen at the high school was made available for larger baking sessions. Margaret received these gestures with poise, yet emphasized the importance of a personal touch. "Every cookie must be crafted with care," she explained. "That's what makes them more than just food." At the back of the local church where Margaret had worshipped for decades, a quaint memorial garden was created. At its center stood a bronze plaque, "The Campbell Cookie Ministry, for love journeys further than we realize." In Margaret's kitchen, age-old symbols gained profound significance. The old tin box marked Andrew Forever 23, which had previously stored photographs, now held an array of military patches, coins, and small tokens from appreciative service members. Next to her flower canister was a folded American flag, not the one belonging to Andrew, which still resided in her living room, but one that had waved over a base in Iraq where her cookies had once provided solace. At Oak Ridge Elementary School, where Margaret dedicated 4 decades of her career, an annual Campbell Kindness Day was established. This event teaches children that even small, consistent acts of compassion can transform lives in ways they may never see. 17-year-old Emma Ethanson, who had previously dismissed the cookie lady with a roll of her eyes, experienced a shift in her viewpoint after observing the helicopter's landing. "I used to think Mrs. Campbell was strange," she confessed to her friends while they baked for the local nursing home. "Now I take cookies to Sunny Pines every Friday." It felt as if she imparted wisdom without uttering a single word. Emma was not by herself. In Oak Ridge, individuals started to recognize chances for humble service, not for accolades, but simply because it was necessary. Margaret had shown that steady dedication outweighs extravagance, that loyalty holds more significance than celebration. On her kitchen wall, Margaret displayed 3 modestly framed quotes that embodied her life philosophy. "Kindness requires no recognition, yet it lingers in memory. Not everyone who acts rightly receives acknowledgement, but their impact is felt in the lives of others." She had no need for them to recall her name. She simply wished for someone to enjoy a cookie and acknowledge that they were not forgotten. The most significant transformation occurred during the town's Veterans Day ceremony, where Margaret, who once stood alone at Andrew's memorial, was now surrounded by dozens, many of whom brought homemade cookies to honor his memory. Captain Matthews returned, accompanied by several members of Andrew's unit, to stand alongside the mother whose kindness had resonated with them from a distance. As winter settled over Oak Ridge, Margaret noticed a slight relief from her arthritis, though she couldn't pinpoint whether it was due to less stress or the comforting embrace of a supportive community. She kept baking, kept sending packages, and maintained the serene example that, against all odds, resonated globally. "Do you ever wish the recognition had come sooner?" Chloe inquired one snowy evening while they packaged cookies together. Margaret reflected on this, her hands moving with a steady grace despite their years. The timing is irrelevant, she finally stated. The cookies were never about me. It was all about remembrance. Remembering Andrew. Remembering all the Andrews who continue to serve. It's important to ensure that no one feels overlooked. As I delve into Margaret Campbell's narrative, I find myself pondering whether the world would be a gentler place with more individuals like her. Amid harsh evaluations, she opted for quietude. In the face of despairing anticipation, she embraced initiative. How many of us have done the right thing without ever receiving thanks? I've been reflecting on Margaret's story for days, considering how contemporary society frequently celebrates the loudest voices, the most dramatic gestures, and the viral moments, while neglecting the quiet consistency that genuinely transforms lives. Margaret never pursued recognition. She sought a connection to her son's memory, to the young men and women who lived the life he had lost, and to a purpose that transcended her grief. Her 8 years of silence hold a deep significance, a rarity in a society that thrives on instant rewards. Margaret Campbell illustrates that true kindness is not a spectacle. It doesn't need to be shared or captured in images. It goes on endlessly, day in and day out, without any acknowledgement. I ponder how many individuals like Margaret exist around us, those whose subtle efforts remain hidden until a striking moment brings them into focus. The retired teacher who offers free tutoring to students in need. The neighbor who clears the sidewalks for everyone before the sun rises. The unknown benefactor who ensures the community shelter stays open. The hospice volunteer who offers companionship to those nearing the end when family is absent. I pay close attention to every comment you share, and I understand that many of you have been someone's Margaret Campbell. You have made the right choices even when it was challenging. You have offered your support when it went unnoticed. You've continued on when others have turned away. We don't seek awards or public acknowledgement. We must have faith that our good actions generate ripples that may remain unseen. Much like Margaret's cookies journeyed across the globe, impacting lives she would never learn about until that Black Hawk touched down. There are individuals who perform acts of kindness quietly. Some individuals remain unnamed in news articles or social media posts. There are those who give selflessly, without anticipating anything in return. And there are cookies made not for recognition or popularity, but for warmth and togetherness. Maybe it's time to reflect on the cookies we are baking. What ongoing kindness can we extend? What commitments can we uphold for those who can no longer do so themselves? Margaret's narrative transcends a soldier's gratitude. It embodies the strength of steadfast dedication to a simple act of kindness and how such dedication can, despite challenges, ultimately be acknowledged and celebrated. If you still have faith in heroes who remain off-screen, join us in sharing their stories. Join Great Man, where acts of kindness leave a lasting impression. Type remember if you've ever encountered someone like Margaret, or if you've ever been that person, carrying out a kind deed when it felt unnoticed or unappreciated. We shared their story. Your contribution added significance. I appreciate it.